They called him the Walrus of Love, but behind that legendary velvet voice lay secrets that would shock the world. A teenage gang member stealing Cadillac tires on the violent streets of South Central Los Angeles, destined for a life behind bars. Fast forward 30 years, and that same man would become the soundtrack to romance for millions, earning 41 platinum albums and a $20 million fortune. But here's what they don't tell you about Barry White's story. It's not just about the music. It's about a voice that literally changed overnight, a friendship that ended in tragedy, and a deathbed secret that tore his family apart for over 2 decades. This is the real story of Barry White, and I guarantee you've never heard it told like this before. September 12th, a baby boy enters the world in Galveston, Texas, but his destiny wouldn't be written in the oil fields or fishing docks of his birthplace. Instead, fate would drag young Barry Eugene Carter to the unforgiving concrete jungle of South Central Los Angeles, where survival meant more than just making it through another day. The South Park neighborhood in the 1950s wasn't just tough, it was a war zone where childhood innocence went to die. Barry's mother, Sadie Carter, worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, often leaving her son to navigate the dangerous streets alone. But even in this harsh environment, something magical was brewing inside the young boy that would change everything. The first sign came during Sunday services at the local Baptist church. While other children fidgeted in their seats, young Barry would stand transfixed by the choir's harmonies, his small body swaying to rhythms that seemed to speak directly to his soul. The church organist, Mrs. Johnson, noticed how the boy's eyes would close during the hymns, as if he was absorbing every note, every emotion, every spiritual vibration that filled the sanctuary. She later told Barry's mother, "That child doesn't just hear music, he feels it in places most people don't even know exist." Little did anyone know that this connection to music would become his lifeline in the darkest chapter of his young life. By age 12, Barry had formed an unlikely brotherhood with his younger brother Daryl. They weren't just siblings, they were partners in survival, a two-man army against a world that seemed determined to crush them before they could even discover who they were meant to become. The brothers developed their own language of loyalty, a code that meant they would never abandon each other no matter how dangerous things became. They called themselves the Carter Boys, and on the streets of South Central that name carried weight. But with reputation came responsibility, and with responsibility came choices that would haunt Barry for years to come. The older boys in the neighborhood taught them that respect was earned through fear, that weakness was a luxury they couldn't afford. Barry learned to fight with his fists, but more importantly, he learned to fight with his mind. He could talk his way out of trouble almost as easily as he could talk his way into it. His natural charisma and quick wit made him a natural leader, but leadership in South Central came with a price. Every day brought new challenges, new threats, new decisions that could mean the difference between going home to his mother's arms or spending the night in a hospital bed. Then came the morning that changed everything. Barry woke up on what seemed like any other day, but when he opened his mouth to speak, the sound that emerged was nothing like the high-pitched voice he'd gone to bed with. It was deep, resonant, almost otherworldly. The transformation was so sudden and dramatic that it terrified both Barry and his mother. "It scared me and my mother when I spoke that morning," he would later recall. "My chest rattled. I mean vibrations that seemed to shake the entire room." His mother stared at him in shock, then slowly broke into tears. "My son's a man now," she whispered, not fully understanding that she had just witnessed the birth of one of music's most distinctive voices. But that gift would have to wait. The streets were calling, and Barry answered. He and Daryl became increasingly involved in gang activity, their reputation growing with each successful score. They weren't just stealing for the thrill, they were stealing for survival, for respect, for the only form of power available to two black boys in 1960s Los Angeles. The brothers had each other's backs through shootouts, arrests, and the constant threat of retaliation from rival gangs. They were inseparable, until the night that almost ended everything. The Cadillac tire heist should have been routine. Barry had done similar jobs dozens of times before, but this time something went wrong. Maybe it was bad intelligence, maybe it was bad luck, or maybe it was just destiny finally catching up with him. The police sirens pierced the night air as Barry found himself cornered in an alley. $30,000 worth of stolen merchandise scattered around him like evidence of a life gone wrong. At 16 years old, Barry White was heading to jail, and everyone who knew him figured his story was over before it had really begun. But 4 months behind bars became 4 months of reflection. Locked in a cell with nothing but his thoughts and a small radio that played through the night, Barry experienced what he would later describe as a spiritual awakening. One evening, Elvis Presley's "It's Now or Never" crackled through the speakers, and something inside Barry shifted. The song didn't just enter his ears, it penetrated his soul, rewiring his DNA, reshaping his understanding of what his life could become. That moment, he would later write, "I realized music wasn't just something I enjoyed, it was something I was born to do." The day Barry walked out of that jail cell, he made a promise to himself that he would keep for the rest of his life. Never again would he allow circumstances to control his destiny. But keeping that promise proved harder than making it. The same neighborhood that had shaped him into a criminal was still there, still offering the same temptations, still presenting the same limited options for a young black man with a criminal record. The difference was that now Barry had a purpose, a vision of something beyond the streets that had nearly destroyed him. His first real chance came through an unexpected invitation. Friends who knew about his incredible voice asked him to join their vocal group as a bass singer. It wasn't a record deal or a golden ticket to stardom, it was just a group of guys from the neighborhood who liked to sing. But for Barry, it represented something more valuable than gold. It was hope. Hope that his voice, that strange gift that had emerged from his teenage body like a miracle, could become the vehicle for his escape from a life of crime and violence. The late 1960s found Barry hustling in the music business with the same intensity he had once brought to the streets. He wrote songs, arranged harmonies, produced demos, and did whatever it took to survive in an industry that chewed up and spit out talented people every single day. For nearly a decade, he lived in the shadows of the music world, his name appearing in small print on records that went nowhere, his voice heard on demos that never became hits. But Barry was learning, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, building relationships and developing the skills that would eventually make him a superstar. The breakthrough came when Barry decided to take complete creative control of his destiny. He founded a girl group called Love Unlimited, envisioning 3 elegant women whose voices would bring his romantic musical fantasies to life. But vision without resources is just a dream, and Barry had no money to make his dream reality. That's when fate introduced him to Larry Nunez, a wealthy businessman who saw something special in the young producer's passion and determination. Nunez didn't just offer financial backing, he offered Barry the chance to prove that his vision was worth believing in. The recording sessions for Love Unlimited's debut album were unlike anything Barry had ever experienced. For the first time in his life, he was completely in control, crafting every note, every arrangement, every emotional moment with the precision of a master painter. The album From a Girl's Point of View We Give to You Love Unlimited wasn't just a collection of songs, it was Barry's musical autobiography, his love letter to the world, his proof that a former gang member could create beauty that touched millions of hearts. When Walking in the Rain with the One I Love reached number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1972, Barry White officially arrived as a force in the music industry. But success brought new challenges, new pressures, and new complications that he never could have anticipated during those hungry years of struggle. The music business was just as brutal as the streets, filled with sharks who smiled while they planned your destruction. Barry learned quickly that talent wasn't enough. You needed intelligence, street smarts, and the ability to navigate politics that made gang warfare look simple. His decision to step into the spotlight as a solo artist in 1973 was both calculated and terrifying. The album I've Got So Much to Give represented everything Barry had learned about music, about love, about the power of a voice to transport listeners to places they never knew existed. The lead single, I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little More Baby, became his calling card, establishing him as the undisputed king of romantic soul music. But with fame came scrutiny, and with scrutiny came criticism from people who didn't understand that behind the sensual lyrics and seductive delivery was a serious artist who had paid his dues in ways most musicians never would. The media often portrayed Barry as a one-dimensional character, a walking caricature of sexuality who existed solely to provide background music for intimate moments. This reduction of his artistry to mere titillation frustrated Barry, but he learned to navigate the criticism with humor and grace. When he appeared on The Simpsons as a parody of himself, he was making a statement. He was in control of his image, comfortable with his sexuality, and confident enough in his talent to laugh at himself.
The real Barry White was far more complex than his public persona suggested. He was a businessman, a father, a philosopher, and a survivor who understood that image was just another tool in the artist's toolkit. But perhaps his greatest regret was never getting the chance to collaborate with his idol, Marvin Gaye. The two legends had been discussing a potential project in the weeks before Gaye's tragic death in 1984. When Marvin called asking Barry to produce his next album, Barry's response revealed his deep respect for Gaye's genius. "Marvin, you're insane. You don't need a producer. I can never produce Marvin Gaye. Marvin is the only one that can produce Marvin." The news of Gaye's death devastated Barry in ways that few people understood. He had lost not just a potential collaborator, but a kindred spirit who understood the weight of being a black artist in America, the pressure of carrying people's dreams on your shoulders, the loneliness that comes with being misunderstood by the very people who claim to love you. Barry's personal life was as complicated as his professional success was impressive. His first marriage to childhood friend Mary produced 4 children, but couldn't survive the pressures of his rising fame and the demons he carried from his street days. His second marriage to Glodian James, a member of Love Unlimited, seemed like a fairy tale, the producer and his muse, creating beautiful music together while building a life filled with love and success. But fairy tales don't always have happy endings, and by 1988, their relationship had deteriorated to the point where they separated, though they never legally divorced. The 1990s brought new triumphs and new challenges. Barry's 1994 album, The Icon Is Love, proved that his voice could still move hearts and his songwriting could still capture the complexities of human relationships. His 1999 Grammy wins for Staying Power validated his continued relevance in a music industry that had changed dramatically since his 1970s heyday. But behind the accolades and the continued success, Barry was fighting a private war against his own body. The weight that had always been part of his image became a health crisis that threatened to end his career and his life. Chronic hypertension, kidney failure, and the need for regular dialysis treatments turned the man who had once commanded stages with his powerful presence into a patient fighting for survival. In May 2003, complications from surgery led to a stroke that impaired his speech and weakened the right side of his body. The voice that had seduced millions was now struggling to form simple words. But Barry's determination to continue performing, even in his compromised state, revealed the depth of his commitment to his art and his fans. When he was forced to perform while seated, unable to move around the stage as he once had, some audience members responded with cruelty rather than compassion. They booed him, demanded that he stand and move, unable or unwilling to understand that they were witnessing a warrior's final battle. His son later reflected on the heartbreak of watching his father struggle to give audiences what they wanted while his body betrayed him at every turn. On July 4, 2003, Barry White's heart finally gave out. He died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, taking with him not just an incredible voice, but also secrets that would tear his family apart for decades to come. The man who had sung about love for 30 years left behind a legacy of legal battles, bitter disputes, and unresolved conflicts that continue to this day. The $20 million estate became a battlefield where children fought step-parents, where promises were broken, and where the love that Barry had celebrated in his music seemed to have no place. His failure to update his will after separating from Glodian meant that she retained control of his estate, leaving his girlfriend Catherine Denton with nothing, and his children fighting for recognition and financial support. The legal battles that followed his death became a cautionary tale about the importance of estate planning, but more importantly, they revealed the human cost of unresolved family dynamics. Today, more than 20 years after his death, Barry White's family is still fighting in courtrooms, still seeking justice, still trying to untangle the web of relationships and responsibilities that he left behind. His former mansion in Sherman Oaks stands as a monument to both his success and his failures, a beautiful estate that fell into disrepair while his heirs fought over who had the right to claim his legacy. But perhaps the most important lesson from Barry White's story isn't about music or money or fame. It's about redemption, about the power of second chances, about the possibility that even someone who seems destined for destruction can find a way to create beauty that outlasts their own mortality. Barry White proved that your past doesn't have to define your future, that talent combined with determination can overcome almost any obstacle, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give the world is simply being authentically, unapologetically yourself. The boy who woke up one morning with a voice that shook the walls became a man whose music continues to soundtrack the most intimate moments of people's lives. The teenager who stole car tires became an artist who created sounds that helped people fall in love, stay in love, and remember what love feels like even when it seems lost forever. The gang member who seemed destined for a life of violence became a gentleman whose music celebrated the gentleness that exists in every human heart. Barry White's story reminds us that transformation is possible, that redemption is real, and that sometimes the greatest victories come not from avoiding our struggles, but from learning to transform our pain into something beautiful that others can use to heal their own wounds. His voice may have fallen silent, but his message continues to resonate. Love is the most powerful force in the universe, and music is the language that allows us to share that love with the world. In the end, that's the legacy that matters most. Not the money, not the awards, not the headlines, but the moments when his voice helped two people find each other in the darkness and reminded them that they were not alone. That's the real magic of Barry White, and that magic will never die.